when she's not in the room. Look at you. Charlie, we're thinking of you. She is doing some very important work, making important connections in saunas in Finland right now. And she asked me, Carol Queen, hi, director and co-founder of the Center for Sex and Culture, to step in, MC for her. I know that some of you come expecting a lot of Charlie force, and I'm just here to MC and looking forward to next month, really. But is there anybody who's here for the first time and has no idea what I just said? Well, you should come next month. Holy moly, you just come back, okay? Just experience the force of nature that is Charlie Jane Anders, the impresaria of this award-winning gig here, Writers with Drinks. Award-winning like she herself is. So Charlie, yeah. Just in case you thought that she just was this literary maven with really good taste in shoes who knew all the writers, she herself is award-winning. So I can't keep up with that. But what I can do is tell you that I think, I have it on good authority, that when Charlie's in Finland, well, she told me in secret that she was there to drink her own weight in vodka. I don't actually know what that would even look like. I wish I were in Finland with her, but I'm so glad I'm with you instead. But what I think maybe is going to happen, like I think Finland wants to award her a big award like so many other places have, and you know, Finland is up there and it's near the Arctic Circle and they've got to do it big. And so I think what's going to happen is that when Charlie is in the sauna having an important meeting, probably with a Finnish translator, to try to figure out how many I's and N's and A's there are going to be in the title of the Finnish version of All the Birds in the Sky, I think what's going to happen is they're going to grab her and put her in one of those machines that you, they press a button and you are encased in glass, but it's quick. Don't worry about her. I don't think they're going to hurt her. I know they'll send her back. I think it's going to be fine. They're going to encase her in glass, and what happens at the end is there's a Charlie size and shape bottle. And I'm pretty sure really good Arctic Circle quality vodka. It's going to get put in the bottle and she will be given that as her award in Finland. I think that's what's going to happen. She'll tell you next month if I was right. I don't know. I miss her though, I do. So we have a wonderful show tonight, and those of you who are Writers with Drinks aficionados and regulars know that Charlie is, most months of the year, kind enough to make this a benefit for the Center for Sex and Culture, hence asking me to come over and make up a cockamamie story about vodka. A topic I know something about, but I may have gotten a little out of my depth there. In case you don't know, the Center for Sex and Culture is a nonprofit. We're on mission between 9th and 10th. We have a library, an archive gallery, some fantastic stuff from our gallerist. Dorian Katz is up there right now. I don't know if you ever thought about, well, I can't even describe it. I blew my wad on Charlie and the vodka and being kidnapped out of a sauna in Finland. I don't even think I can explain it to you, but I hope you'll come and look at the art. I hope you'll come and enjoy the books. I hope you'll come enjoy some of the other things that we do there. You've gotten a card about us if you took a card from our wonderful intern Maya, and maybe you want to get on our email list. And we'll tell you more cool things that we do. We hope we see you there. Now, I think, thank you. You know, CSC has been around since we got our first nonprofit status, our state nonprofit status in the year 2000. Back when, which was practically the 1990s. I know some of you weren't born yet, I know. But it was a good year in certain respects. And then we got our federal nonprofit status in 2001, and then all hell broke loose. But we're still here, and so are you, and it's great to share this time. And to be together in the best decorated bar in San Francisco, that's an honor, did you think? All right. I'm just going to move us on to our first reader. I'm really excited to hear all of the readers who Charlie curated before she went to do the vodka cleanse in Finland. And first up, we have Nick Farmer. Nick is a writer and linguist based in Oakland. He created the Belter language for Sci-Fi's The Expanse. Oh, that's why you're here. Excellent. Contributed to the bestseller Introductory Linguistics textbook published by MIT Press. Right on, because not everyone is paying attention to linguistics these days. If you know what I mean. And works to support endangered and indigenous languages. His first book is The Survivors, a science fiction novel, and I'm so honored to welcome Nick Farmer. Come on.
So, given that I was billed as a linguist, I thought at first I would read from the textbook, but then somebody told me that was not the best idea. So instead, thank you. A little bit of a height difference. So instead I'm going to be reading from the first chapter of an upcoming novel, and I'll just give a little context. It's a science fiction novel which takes place on a planet that has a synchronous rotation, so one side is always facing the sun, one side's always facing away. You have a band that is always in sunset, and at first I thought I was going to call it Twilight, but then I found out that was taken. And then I thought I was going to call it Twilight Zone, but that was taken too. So there's a species that lives there. They're born genderless, but then when they reach adulthood, society assigns them a gender based on their abilities. The lesser able become male, and the superior become female. So it's an epic, science fiction novel. It's kind of like Game of Thrones, starring trans matriarchal aliens. Sighing to herself and pumping extra blood through her achingly cold back, Big Silver signaled to her companions to halt. They had been patrolling the edge of dusk for near 4 times the normal deployment, suffering under strong winds and an unusually long cold period. Most of the males in the group were starving and beyond exhaustion. The female officers had fared only a little better, but were much more stoic, masking their fatigue. Normally they would already be in the barracks, quaffing strong liquor, telling outrageous stories, and preparing for the games. But when strange rumors of banditry made their way to the fortress, conveyed by multiple relays of deep calls, this was the only available platoon. They had been dispatched immediately with orders direct from the council not to return until they had completed their investigation. So far they had heard nothing from the other settlements beyond the same vague stories of monstrous tracks and shapes seen in the distance. The ignorant whispered of darklings. It was all a wild beast chase. She should be deployed at sunrise, where the real action was, fighting bright ones or pitch ones, keeping the people safe from their traditional enemies. Big Silver chafed at the wasted time. Bandits were beneath her, and the claim of darklings, it wasn't even worth considering. Darklings never even came close to the edge of dusk, and the people rarely went into the dark. In fact, only the most elite and courageous of hunting parties crossed dusk. None of the villagers could have any real idea of what darklings looked like. The trophies were kept hidden from peasants, used for sacred and important rituals. They had probably just seen an overgrown work beast, or some young unisexers were playing a stupid prank on their gullible elders. Sensing the mood of the platoon stretched near to breaking, Big Silver acquiesced slightly and gave the order to feed, a quarter ration, or just enough to take the edge off of everyone's hunger, and not so much as to make anyone sick. The relief and gratitude was palpable. While the others ate, Big Silver refrained, opting to project an image of strength and self-control. A couple of the more ambitious females took notice and put their own food away to try to emulate their leader. Big Silver saw this but paid no heed. None of these soldiers ranked high enough among the people to even hallucinate of challenging her. She was a legend, third oldest of the council, but as battle matron, ranking only below the matriarch's family. She was renowned throughout the Middle Land for her cunning and prowess, having been victorious in more battles than anyone else in recent records. Her ascendance to battle matron was widely considered to be the direct cause of the people's resurgence. Shifting the war from defensive to offensive, she led the first raids into the light in generations. At one point, her forces had caused enough damage to a primary colony of Bright Ones that it collapsed and was cannibalized by its neighbors. The subsequent fallout had kept the Bright Ones distracted for a half-generation, allowing the people to consolidate holdings throughout the Sunrise border and even into some of the light. Yet unbridled success came with its own pitfalls, which Big Silver had discovered to her supreme annoyance. She had never bothered with politics, eschewing the whispers of the subchambers for more direct methods of dealing with problems. She was far too strong to be challenged outright, and too popular to be removed, but jealous rivals in the council, led by her own cousin, Soft Red Stripes, managed to arrange for her assignment to the Dusk. They had declared it to be the next frontier for expansion, but she knew the truth. The Dark was uninhabitable for the people, and the Dusk would never be more than a quiet backwater. Some might have enjoyed the cushy post, but it effectively handcuffed her. Indeed, she was sure that this investigation was just a way for Soft Red Stripes to needle her. Forcing the frustrated thoughts from her mind, Big Silver brought her attention back to the task at hand. A waste of effort it may be, but a job was a job, and she would do it right. It was time to move. If she let the platoon dawdle too long, they would grow lax. A soft, rumbling signal was enough to rouse them all, and the march began again. The Time Star had just risen above the horizon, adding its own incremental light to the sky as they approached the final settlement on their itinerary, lying just on the other side of Low Hills. After sweeping the area and questioning the residents, they would finally be able to return to the fortress. Big Silver stretched out the tight muscles in her shoulders, looking forward to the end of this fiasco and a good long bath. A tremor shivered up her legs. She was not the most sensitive of the troop, but she was the only one who would recognize that particular signal. She froze, straining her senses, seeking against belief for the telltale signs. The tremor came again, strong enough that even the most deaf could feel it, though they did not know what it meant, but she knew, and shock flowed through her. Darkling, without a doubt. What was a Darkling doing here, in the dusk? It could not be, but there was no time to second-guess impossibilities. At this distance, the Darkling was almost certainly aware of them, and preparing to attack. The best chance for success now was to strike hard and fast from the high ground. Bursting out a warning and signaling commands, Big Silver drew her spears and charged up the rise. Her unseasoned platoon fell in behind her, and Big Silver could almost taste their fear. They were about to face the deadliest creature of the three lands, with little more than standard-issue weapons and none of the intricate planning the hunting bands had. But though they might be unprepared, they had one undeniable advantage: Big Silver, the greatest warrior the people had ever seen. Roaring her battle static, Big Silver released the pheromones which would drive the males to a killing frenzy. The females drew apart. Even the freshest recruits knew better than to be too close to berserking males. At the top of the hill, Big Silver saw the Darkling, crouched in a burrow and surrounded by the half-eaten corpses of the people of the settlement. In the low light of dusk, it was even more monstrous looking than its echo appearance of the dark. Standing on dozens of limbs, the smallest still the size of a full-grown female, the Darkling was shaped like a flattened tube, with a hollowing at one end that served as mouth and anus both. Big Silver was proud that none of the people of her troop hesitated in their charge. The ripples of the Darkling's skin sped to a crescendo, and at the last possible moment, Big Silver jolted the command to jump. Her powerful legs launched her into the air just as a series of loud clicks ripped through the stillness, followed by a boom. The Darkling released its charge, pumping a powerful electric shock into the ground. The soldiers who hadn't followed her command quickly enough were struck dead immediately, a quarter of her force gone before they could even strike a blow. The Darkling shuddered and was temporarily paralyzed. It was at its most vulnerable just after a shock attack, and Big Silver intended to take advantage. Landing directly on top of it, she slammed both her spears into the misshapen body at just the right angle, piercing two of its nervous centers. The spears were now too deep for her to pull them out again, so she drew the axe from her belt and began chopping methodically like a woods worker. Her platoon reached just a moment later, stabbing and slicing with abandon. The Darkling finally recovered enough to fight back, but it was already weakened by the loss of its largest nervous centers, and only managed a few weak swipes before collapsing. Nonetheless, even these were enough to kill several more of her shoulders. They continued their dismemberment of the Darkling long after it stopped moving, until Big Silver, still perched on the Darkling's back, was satisfied that the creature was well and truly dead. The platoon collectively roared in victory. Big Silver swelled with pride at the accomplishment of her now veteran troops, and she considered with amused relish the consternation her rivals would feel upon finding that their plan had backfired on them, leading her to even more glory. A Darkling, the first ever seen outside of its lands, killed by Big Silver and her own unprepared and under-equipped troops. This was unprecedented. The males of her troops would be permitted to ascend to femaleness. The females would all rise in rank, and the matriarch would be obliged to give her a boon. She could... boom! A second Darkling hidden in the burrow released its attack, and in an instant, all her soldiers were dead. Their hearts stopped and bodies half-cooked and steaming in the cold. Big Silver, shielded by the corpse of the Darkling she stood on, was left to face the new threat alone. She cursed herself for a fool for not paying closer attention. Darklings always hunted alone, but faced with one impossibility, she should have been ready for another. Her spears still firmly lodged in the first Darkling and her soldiers annihilated, she could not repeat the same strategy, nor could she hope to flee. In her heart, she knew she was already dead. No one had ever faced a Darkling alone and survived. Her only wish now was to deal as much damage to the monster as she could before it took her. Leaping to the ground, she rumbled a ciphered deep call as loud as she could, declaring herself to all who might be able to hear before reporting the Darklings. Though they may not understand the contents, any citizen old enough to speak would understand their duty in transmitting the message to the authorities who would make sure it found its way up the hierarchy. But this was no longer her concern. It was time to attack. Even with that short call, she had already lost valuable time. The Darkling was almost recovered. Big Silver kept calm, disabling as many of the limbs as she could in the time she had. But before long, the creature stirred. Big Silver fell back out of its reach as it drew itself up again. Its deadliest weapon was its bioelectricity, but it could take several tenth degrees of the time star for it to charge again, and lacking teeth or venom, the mouth was not a danger. Yet despite its enormous size, a Darkling could move with startling speed in one direction and could crush her with a single blow. It lurched forward, but she was prepared. Sidestepping the attack, she whipped her axe out in a tight arc, leaving yet another lifeless limb on the ground. The Darkling tried this again a second time, with the same result. Big Silver knew, however, that without striking a nervous center, she was only annoying the Darkling rather than truly harming it. The thing could move nearly as fast with its limbs folded against its body, wriggling like an owl. The nervous centers on its back were too deep for her axe, but there were others closer to the surface. Circling the Darkling, she feigned a stumble. Falling for the ruse, the beast rushed her, but her seemingly off-balance tumble turned into a roll, and she sprung safely underneath the Darkling, burying her axe in the joint of its largest limb and darting away before it could fall on her. The body shuddered, giving her time to retrieve a weapon from one of her dead soldiers, a spear, inferior to her own but serviceable. The Darkling was distracted, trying to dislodge the axe, but only succeeding in burying it further. Missing a number of its limbs and others now dragging uselessly, the Darkling stumbled around drunkenly. Big Silver dashed in to hit it again, and dodging ill-balanced attacks managed to pierce another nervous center. She could feel the injured beast's electrical signals varying wildly in pain and desperation. She let the smallest flicker of hope rise that she might, in fact, survive this encounter. She was sure that if she could manage to pierce one more nervous center, the Darkling would be paralyzed enough that she could safely wait for it to die. Planning one final attack, she gathered her remaining strength and rushed forward. Quicker than she had believed possible, the Darkling folded its legs that faced her and pushed up on the other side, effectively flipping itself. Before Big Silver could react, the flank of the beast crashed on top of her, pinning her legs. She screamed in pain, nearly blacking out, but flaring her hormones, she forced herself to keep conscience. The Darkling was trying to roll over on top of her to finish the job, but partially paralyzed as it was, could not quite manage. There was no way she could get herself out from under it, and even if she succeeded, her legs were crushed to the point of uselessness. But she still held the spear in her hands, and she would die stabbing. Raising the weapon over her head, she saw her lone opportunity. By falling on its side, the Darkling had exposed its nervous centers on the back. Big Silver desperately plunged her spear into the flesh of the monster. The Darkling spasmed in its death throes, grinding her legs and sending waves of pain through her body before it released a final burst of electricity. This last assault was too much for Big Silver, and as her heart stopped, she drifted into an empty darkness.
Oh.